Hey, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of the Trend Report podcast. I'm really glad you're here today for what I know is going to be another fascinating conversation with my guest today, Rob Langejans with Always Strategic. Hey, Rob, how are you?
Great. How are you, Sid? Thanks for the invitation to join you today.
Oh, Rob, I'm doing really well. Thank you so much. And I appreciate you being here. You and I actually have been connected on LinkedIn for a while, but never really met until recently because though we did work for the same major brand, our paths did not actually cross. So I'm glad to have you here.
Well, thank you. And it has been good to get to know you too over these last couple of years. And I want to say thank you for what you do for the industry, Sid. And because this trend report is fabulous, a lot of good information and good connections with people. I've listened to some episodes, not all of them, I'm sorry, but I've listened to some and got really good information from them. And I'll just share a quick anecdote. So maybe 10 years ago or so, when I was working for a major manufacturer, there'd be times in your career where you think, maybe it's time for a career change. Just things happen, right? I mean, it's happening now like crazy in the world. We hear about people jumping jobs. But anyway, there would be times, and I always said to myself, if I leave this company, I'll probably leave the industry. For some reason, I always said it's such a complex industry. There's so much going on. I'll leave the industry and do something simpler. And now that I'm running my own business, I quite honestly, when I started my website, I sort of authored it to anyone, but now I'm like, no way, this is a great industry. I love the people. I love what's going on. And the complexity makes it more enjoyable. And so thanks for what you do for the industry. And I'm glad that you're leading the way to have a forum. So thank you.
Oh, well, it's my pleasure. And I appreciate you saying that. That was not a pitch, guys, by the way. I didn't prompt him to say that. But I really appreciate the support, not just of you, but of everybody in the community. It continues to grow. Our reach is getting better. And I really enjoy having conversations with people and giving the people opportunity to share their voice and to be heard in our industry in a way that we really haven't had before. So, which is why you're here, because you're doing some really unique things. So let's jump in, Rob. Tell us who you are and what it is that you're doing today.
Sure. I'm originally from Michigan and worked in Michigan for most of my life. And today I live in Phoenix and have been for 4 years. And I started in 2020 a business called Always Strategic. And I really wanted to have that word strategic in the business name, because I'm sort of wired. Everything I do, I try to think about, okay, what's the strategy? How do we be strategic in this upcoming conversation? And so I offer coaching and training programs in the industry primarily. As I mentioned before, I didn't predict it, but that's where all my business is, and I love it. And how can we strategically go to the core, which for me, the core is people buy from people. Everything I do as a business, and if listeners go to my website, you'll see it's all about people buy from people. And there are some dynamics at play there. And there's so many, in our industry is complex. And so is just a one-on-one conversation with someone between generations and competition and decision-making, and all these things are at play. Well, how can we be more strategic while we're connecting with people and building relationships? So everything I do, both in training and in coaching, is always on that strategic thing, and people buy from people.
Yeah, those are all three things that are really important to me personally, obviously as a coach myself, and as somebody who does some trainings. And I'm also an avid consumer of trainings. I mean, I enroll in a lot of different trainings to always be moving forward and bettering myself and growing. But relationships are a cornerstone of our industry. It's just becoming a really big challenge these days to build relationships, especially with people that you don't know because of what's happening in the world. And, I do believe that hybrid work poses an amazing opportunity for our industry, but also it presents itself an enormous challenge for our industry because we are such a relationship driven industry. And we're not going to dive into all that today, but I appreciate the opportunity to interview a coach, get your perspectives on things, and really share kind of really what you're focusing on. And, Rob, one of the things that you were talking about was people buy from people, and we understand the power of relationships, but as a coach, you're probably like me and you're asking a lot of questions. And there's a lot of power in asking questions. So can you share a little of your philosophy about the power of asking questions?
Sure. And it's everyone on the call will know, on the listening, everyone knows questions are key, right? And you can go back to some core things. I don't teach this, but there's BANT, right? There's budget authority, need, and timing, and you can ask questions around those things. And yeah, those are important, but they're mostly important for the seller. When I coach teams and individuals who are getting ready to host a client in the showroom, or it's a virtual showroom tour or whatever it is, when I coach them, I always want to get to more insightful questions. So there are those baseline questions you need to know, but those don't bring any value to the customer. In fact, when you do those questions and the customer just had 3 previous calls with competitors who asked the same questions, now you're just annoying them. So how can we get past some of those baseline questions like budget and timing and square footage and all those things, which we need? Yes, we need, but let's move on to insightful. So I bet your next question is, well, what are insightful questions?
Well, actually, it's really interesting you say that. Yes. But, we as an industry, because we were trained this way, especially because I grew up in the industry in a sales role, and we're trained to ask those questions like, what's your budget? How many square feet do you have? How many people? Very tactical questions. But what you're about to talk about is strategic questions and changing the conversation. Yes, we need to know all that information, but we don't need to know it in the very first interaction with a client. So tell us a little bit more about your theory on questions, insightful questions.
You bet. So as you said, you listen and read and learn. I'm a consummate reader as well. And so I'm always reading books, and I pull great ideas. And every time I read a book, like something is back from 12 years ago, the Challenger sale, or things more recent, whatever I read, I have the lens of furniture that I'm reading the book through. And I translate that book into, what does it mean to us in our industry? What does it mean to a conversation with someone in purchasing versus in HR or marketing or facility, and to what they're trying to accomplish? So I always use that lens as I read these books. And there's a lot of different thinking and different approaches. What I tend to do is here's the question, the baseline for, is it insightful or is it basic? When you ask a question and the customer has the answer already, it's probably not an insightful question. It's not as much value as if the customer doesn't know the answer, or has to think for a moment to get it, or they have to look at each other who are on the call or in the room and decide together what is the answer.
Okay.
So
I want to ask a question here. Can you give us an example of an insightful question?
Sure. It's let me finish one thought and then I'll give you an example. Yeah. So if the customer answers with, I didn't think of it that way, that's like, raise your hands. Yeah, that's a powerful question. That's insightful, because the customer, it wasn't on their list of criteria before they walked in. So it may be something like when they say, hey, we want to move from where we have a lease and we're moving in soon, and we're going to move from what we're in today in this environment into a more collaborative environment. All right. So who doesn't hear the word collaborative, right? Yeah. Everybody hears word. So the way to move beyond collaborative is, what are people going to be able to do in their collaborative environment that they can't do today? So how deep is that? I don't know, but it's moving from the furniture into what people are doing in the furniture. Yeah. So when we take it off the furniture instead a salesperson sometimes jumps right into the furniture to say, okay, so you're thinking like sofas, and you're thinking of blah, 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 and soft seating, and instead they move it away from what the furniture is to what the furniture does for people. So that would be maybe a simple example. What can they do in the future that they can't do today? So you'll get a mix of answers, right?
Yeah, absolutely. But I really like where you went with it, because so many times we go straight to the product. Like, well, you could use sofas in here, and you could use a swing over here, and you could use swivel chairs over here and occasional tables here, without really understanding the problem that the customer's facing, or the problem their employees might be having, and what the real purpose of the space is. By asking different questions, you're going to get information that's going to allow you as a dealer or a manufacturer to design and furnish a space that works for the client before you ever even talk about the type of furniture that they need.
Yeah. And even in a showroom visit, I work with teams quite often on how to use their showroom as a selling tool. So instead of just a museum tour, like, hey, don't stop me, I'm on a roll here, I'm telling you all about our showroom. Instead, is there a way to have dialogue and conversation and learn, so the customer can learn about themselves as we learn about them as a
Sure.
selling team?
Absolutely.
So how can they learn about themselves? And there's dynamics to that and ways to do it.
I really appreciate what you just said. Because I have flashbacks as you were saying that about giving showroom tours, both at a factory level and at a dealer level, where, oh, well, this is our conference room and this is so-and-so's table in here and so-and-so's chair. And here's our mainline systems. This is our customer service team. And you're the whole time giving a product pitch rather than curating an experience, if you will. But you said something that I want to go back to, because we did not talk about this in the very beginning, which you said you do coaching and training. But talk to us a little bit more about the types of services that you offer to the community, because we kind of skipped over that. So I want to make sure that everybody understands the types of services that you provide.
Absolutely. There's two primary things I do. One is coaching for live opportunity strategy and execution. So a team has a presentation, whether it's an interview or a visit or a mock-up, whatever it is, there's an engagement. So everything I do is people buy from people. So there's an engagement on the calendar. And I get a call and they say, Rob, we need some help getting ready for this engagement, whatever that topic is. And it could be an individual, it could be a team. Quite often it's a team. And I'll work with them on virtually, usually,
Sure.
to help the team get ready, both on strategy and on execution. Now, the best metaphor for that is I'm kind of like the director of a play. And the director of a play doesn't write the play and the director doesn't star in the play, but they help those two things come together for a great performance. So in that metaphor, what I do is help. I don't write the strategy or the content of what a team is going to say. Now, I do contribute to it, absolutely.
Sure.
And challenge the team as they plan what they're going to do in this experience with the customer. And so I might contribute to it, unlike a director of a play might. So that's where it falls down a little bit. But anyway, it's pulling those two things together, what they're going to say and how they're going to say it, and engage the customer using IQ, EQ, and acumen. How do they pull those three things together for a powerful engagement, one that's memorable, one that's moving, one that's meaningful, and puts them in first place in the mind of the customer? So that's one area.
Okay. I have a follow-up question to that.
Yeah.
Why is that important today?
What's more important? I thank you for asking that question, because sometimes people say, well, and I'll ask, what's the most important thing in your sales process? It's not the bid. So yes, bids are important, not the most important. It's is it the showroom and that it's new and up to date? Is that important? Yes. You know what's most important is when people buy from people, because and how you execute and how you use your intelligence and your emotional intelligence to generate the preference in the mind of the customer. Because if you might do a great bid, you might come out first in the bid process. There's 4 lined up and they say, this is the company, the dealer, and the manufacturer, this is it. And then they meet you and they go, not so sure anymore. It tips the scale. Now, yes, you have to have a great bid, but it has to be at least as good as the others. In the face-to-face, you have to be better. You can't just be the same. You can't be average. You have to go from common to compelling. And there are some dynamics to do that. That's where I help teams. That's where I help teams go. And when I work with them, that's what my goal. And
so I love the phrase common to compelling. And it's really about shifting the mindset of, let's not keep doing things the way that we've always done them. Let's be different. Let's stand out. Let's tell a different story, so that experience. I've had a lot of people on the show this year talk about customer experience. So the experience that you're creating for that client coming into your showroom is better than anyone else's, so that you're not common, you're the compelling reason. And I'm going to add to this, because I hear it all the time from the dealers that I work with. Competition right now is steep. Used to be projects may have 3 or 4 competitors on them. And I had this conversation. I may have mentioned this before on the episode, guys, but or a former episode, but I was talking to a rep recently that was telling me that it was a hospital project out in a rural marketplace. Typically there's only 3 people that show up to bid on the project. There were 9.
Wow. Yeah.
So the competition has really, really increased. So doing things to stand out and make your overall package better, including the in-person, if you will, or even virtual presentation to where it's super compelling is really important, especially right now.
I fully agree. And what I find puzzling, and I can't quite figure it out, I'd love to hear your perspective, is every time I talk to dealers, they're over the top busy. They're so busy. And I love that because that's better than, hey, we're laying people off, right? So they're hiring, they're busier than busy. And yet the pie seems to be smaller. So I guess my summary is then everyone's going after whatever is out there.
Yeah.
And so it's even more important to be really, really good at all pieces of the sales process, creating value all the way through the sales process, so that in the end, the customer says, yeah, this is the team we want to join up with. We're going to know them now for years.
Yep.
We better be sure about this. And if
Well,
you put yourself in the customer's shoes, there's a lot of risk to that decision. So,
oh, absolutely. There is. And to give you my response to that question, we've seen, and I've talked to dealers specifically who have been telling me stories of competitive dealers, maybe even the same alignment, coming from out of market, but selling different products, going after that project. So the pie is smaller. They are busy. And I hear that a lot. They are busy, but the projects they're going after, the pool of them is smaller because there's still a lot, guys. We're recording this in August. And there's still a lot of uncertainty about return to the workplace. When is it going to happen? How's it going to happen? The downsizing of space. And also there's still a lot of things up in the air about it, but the projects that are out there are way more competitive. So the pie of opportunity, if you will, is smaller, which is why I'm going to quote, you always need to be strategic.
That's right.
So,
hey, can I use that?
There?
That's
Yeah,
good.
absolutely. Absolutely. I'll just trademark it real quick and then you can pay me a fee. Okay. How's that?
It sounds good to me. We're all in this together. Why not?
So Rob, let's talk about the second component of your business, which is training. And what is it that you do from a training perspective?
Some of what I do is reactive, where people call and say, this is the need. Can you do something on this in this regard? And I'll say, absolutely, if it fits into my wheelhouse. And which is always selling skills. So I don't do any product training or any technology training. That's other people do really good jobs there. It's always selling skills. And so people ask, can you do this for me? And so I put together highly customized training options and opportunities. I'm happy to travel right now. I've been doing a lot of travel. And even through the pandemic, I was traveling. So I'm happy to do it. If people want me in person, it's so rich. And I was recently doing an in-person training session, and it's so powerful to be in person. It's just a completely different dynamic, as we all know.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I do online, of course. What's that?
Yeah, the in-person is much better, much more engagement, a better connection with the people that are in the training process, better opportunity to ask questions, feel comfortable. But it also creates that relationship where you're now connected with the trainer and the participant, if you will. You have a deeper connection, which is, I mean, there's no doubt. I don't think anybody listening would disagree that in-person is better. It's just, are we ever going to get back all the way to in-person all the time?
It is true for customers. They would rather, and as a sales team, in-person is always better. Well, we do the best we can right now, and we're moving hopefully in that direction. The sooner the better, we all know. So in person, I'm happy to do it. So reactive is one section of what I do. People call this my need, is what it is. The other one is things that I have sort of ready to go. And that would be, the core thing would be presentation skills, both in person or virtual. So how do you it's called strategic presentations. And so what is a strategic presentation? How do you organize it? I use the basic things of look, tone, and words. So there's videotaping, and there's practice, and there's exercises on what are the core behaviors in a great presentation. So I do that either virtual or I do it in person. There are different approaches each way. I also do that, what I mentioned, using the showroom as a selling tool. And I do that on a regular basis with clients. So it's a short 2-hour thing that's highly interactive and very applicable to what teams do. I also do, I have a process called Ladder. It's on my website. The process itself is a PDF, so anybody can download it. Ladder stands for learn, aim, and then draft, drill, execute, and review. So Ladder, it's kind of a long one, you got to see it. But learn and aim is, you got to start with the customer. It's always about the customer. So learn about the customer, and then aim your messaging and your content and what you ask and say towards what you learned about them. Then draft your outline for the upcoming face-to-face engagement, and then practice it or drill practice, and then engage or execute. That's in front of the customer. I don't work there. That's you. Go do it. And then review. So ladder is a cyclical thing all the way through the sales process. I also have something called COLA, which is complex, opportunity, learn, and aim. And so that's my version of an electronic blue sheet. So some people will remember the blue sheet. It's still out there. I did my own very specific to the furniture industry, and it's very in-depth on learning about the customer and then strategizing. So
see, I don't think we take enough time to actually learn about the customer because we're so focused on the bid or the product and converting it over to our version of what product we think is best, making sure we got the best discounting and the best pricing and the lowest installation cost. And then so many times we don't take the opportunity to really learn and get to know the customer. I'm going to share a quick little story. I actually posted about this on my LinkedIn profile. It was LinkedIn content for me actually this week. Many, many years ago when I was leading a very large initiative for the brand that I was working for, the client was coming in and the client was on the leading edge of business casual. And the company that I was working at was much more formal than that. It was always white tablecloth in the dining room, served by people. And I was telling my boss, that's not their culture. The culture of our client, that's not their culture. We got to do something different. And so took some convincing, but we ended up having a barbecue, like red checkered tablecloths. We had the barbecue catered. We had it outside. It was a beautiful day and it was a huge hit. In fact, when we did win that project and they came to give us an executive debrief about why we won that business, part of that debrief included that we understood their culture and that we embraced their culture rather than forcing our culture on them. And that comes from learning the client and getting to know them.
Absolutely. That's exactly the thing that trips most teams up is they use the first question teams ask themselves when they have this engagement on the calendar or a presentation. They say, what are we going to say? First question, what are we going to say? That's not the first question. The first question is, who's the customer? What's the decision criteria? In fact, when I ask teams, what's the decision criteria on what are you being judged in this presentation? I usually get crickets. Or they say it's going to be, this and price and delivery. No, that's not it. Yes, that's the IQ part, but you're being judged probably on the dynamics. The customer sometimes can't even tell you what they're judging you on. And yet it's far more than just what's on paper. So you can never do the same presentation twice. It's great to grab an existing slide deck if you need to, and build off of it. But there's never the same customer twice. You can never do the same presentation twice because the customer changes. So thank you for that story. That's awesome.
Well, I would encourage everybody to hit the back button a few times and go back and listen to what Rob just said again, because it really is powerful because, the world around us is changing and we have to change and adapt with it. And I think the message that you're sharing, Rob, is that it is time to adjust the way we're selling and take a different approach to it. And honestly, lead a transformation in our industry, a positive transformation, even disruption, if you will, in our industry to do things differently. Because if everybody that listening was right here with us and I asked them to raise their hand about who enjoyed the bidding process, there wouldn't be a hand that went up because it's painful and it's not fun. But once you do get to a place you can truly build a relationship with a client, you need to take that opportunity to do things differently and to honestly change the narrative.
Yeah, I love it. And drive decisions. That's the work I do is remind the team you're helping the client make a decision, either for you or against you. And if it's against you, let's get that decision early rather than late.
Yeah.
And so how do you organize what you do in the engagement to drive a decision? And there's a lot more many more dynamics to that, but yeah, decision making.
I want to know how you got into this. You started your entrepreneur journey in 2020, which is never a good time to start a business. Obviously, we didn't know what was going to happen, but what led you to coaching and training in our industry based on what you used to do? How did you get to where you are today with Always Strategic?
Yeah, everyone has a story, right? Everyone has a background and how they got into the industry. And I
Mhm.
always joke, some bad decisions along the way got me into this industry.
I
And
love that.
I'm one of you, so I can joke
Yeah.
that way, right? But anyway, so my first, what I call my MBA. Now, I don't have an MBA, but what I do call my MBA is when I worked for a woman in Grand Rapids, Michigan, who for 7 years, she turned me from an average person into a business professional. And she was a mentor and a leader and my employer, and she saw potential in me that I didn't know I had.
Mhm.
And what she did, and she was a very directive type personality style, and everything was her way. And there were some really good reasons for it. When I left for many different dynamics, she sold her business and some things changed. When I left and went to work for a manufacturer, I started to take classes like in Miller Hyman and spin selling and all these
Mhm.
other courses, and Ken Blanchard and situation leadership. Every time I would take one of these, I'd say, my old boss, she did all these things. So she was one of those people that would have been who did if they researched what do the best sellers do, she did those things and maybe didn't even know it. And so she was definitely, I call it my MBA. And now, not in finance and all those things, but in
Right.
business professional and business acumen and things, she really was a huge influence. So when I started for the manufacturer, that's when I broadened and got to really know the industry even better than I did before, because I had been doing work for Miller and Steelcase and Hayworth and Trendway and others. And so, and general contractors and designers. So I was doing a lot of work in the industry. And so I've built all these competencies, and I look back and say, wow, I didn't know that this road would bring me to where I am today. And it's serendipity many times. Like, I didn't know that doing this piece of work just 3 years ago was going to directly impact what I do today.
Mhm.
The other answer are mentors and coworkers and colleagues over the years that have been encouraging and helpful and challenging. So all those things have contributed to what I'm doing today. And I love what I do, and I'm excited for the future and these new programs I have coming out, a couple of them, and I'm very excited to launch a few new things, which are just going to be fantastic. So,
Well, I'm excited for you too. I mean, you're doing some really unique things. We have very similar journeys, but very different because we don't do the same thing. And we do think
mhm.
we do support the same community, but we do different things to support that community. But you just highlighted something that I think is really, really important. So important that I wrote a column about it a couple of weeks ago. Most of you know I'm a contributing writer to the Business of Furniture magazine, where I write about topics relative to professional development and growth. And I had a column come out a couple of weeks ago called "Why Having a Mentor is Essential to Your Career."
Mhm.
And I talk about mentors, how you go about the process of finding one. I actually included in there a link to watch a tribute to one of my mentors that I recorded a video shortly after I learned of his passing. And mentors are just so important for us in many different reasons. So, Rob, I'm curious, who's a mentor for you that really, you mentioned that the lady that was your boss, but is there someone in your career that really stands out that this person was an amazing mentor to me?
Well, sure. I'll share a couple. One is very recently is Jim Ryerson from Sales
Mhm.
Octane, because when I started my business in 2020, I didn't know what I was doing. And Jim went over the top to be helpful
Mhm.
in launching a business. He's been doing it for 19 years. And so he knows what he's up to. And just really, he took a personal interest in my success. So beyond just a mentor of advice, he also gave direction and
Sure.
ideas and opened some doors to other technologies I wasn't aware of and other people who could help. And so he's absolutely one of them that I have a deep appreciation for. And so if you're listening, Jim, thank you very much. And there are many others. I'm afraid to give too many names because I'll lose track of some of them. Another one I know is Rob Pocock, and Rob is in Holland, Michigan, and he's my first job out of college was selling cars. Sid, what was your
Wow.
first job out of college? What was the first thing, like the real first occupation you had?
Yeah, the one I actually got real money for.
Yeah.
Believe it or not, Rob, it was actually in our industry.
Ah.
I'll tell a quick story. When I was in college, I worked for a school supply company. And that school supply company, I worked in their retail store, but I also kept a library for the furniture sellers. And so when I got out of college, they offered me an opportunity to go to Birmingham, Alabama to work in the retail store selling office supplies, but also to work in their budget furniture store. And so I walked into this unair conditioned, bright yellow building and sold office furniture. At the same time, I was selling office supplies, but I didn't have anybody to teach me about what laminate was versus what veneer was. I remember somebody trying to explain it to me and my eyes just glazed over.
Yeah.
So I actually came right out of college into this job. But what was your first one?
Yeah, it was selling cars.
Oh,
And
you said that, selling cars.
yeah. And so this Rob Pocock, I sold him a car. Now he knew my older brother from college, so I kind of knew who he was, but I sold him a car. That's our claim to fame. And ever since then, he's been someone I would go to when making big decisions and business decisions. And over the years, we've gotten close. Then we were working together at this business I shared with you earlier, where I got kind of my MBA in my mind.
Yep.
And he was also a coach and a mentor in that situation. So he's been a great friend and a great colleague and a mentor. And of course, there are others. Others have said to me, Rob, you've been a mentor to me. And I'm so taken aback by that.
Right.
Because I don't think of myself as a mentor. And yet others tell me, and they've written it on my LinkedIn page, I guess, and say he's mentored me in this and that and the next thing. And it's so gratifying.
Yes.
To know others have been influenced or impacted through some of the work I've done over the years. So that's very gratifying. So
yeah, I think one of the important things about a mentor is it's great to have a formal plan to have a mentor. Hey, will you mentor me to help me with this kind of thing? But so many times we are mentors and we don't even know that we are. And we have that same opportunity to use someone else as a mentor and to learn by example and the way they do things, how they make decisions. So there's a large gamut here of mentorship opportunity. And I didn't want to turn this into that, but you mentioned it. And I just think it's so important that we all need mentors in our lives, regardless of what stage at our life we are. And you and I are perfect examples. We are over the age of, sorry, I didn't say that out loud. And we both recently in the last few years have started a different journey in an industry that we love, supporting people, but we've needed help along the way to learn and grow along the way, because this journey it is a journey, and we're going to do something one day. And then the next day we're going to say, well, that really wasn't a good idea. Let's try to do something differently.
I've done that already. I've already done that, right? This is definitely a learning process. Every day is a learning process. So
yeah, no doubt. Well, Rob, I'm really, really excited about what you're doing. It's been a pleasure to have the opportunity to get to know you over the last couple of years. I'm excited to have another coach in the industry helping to have a positive impact on the people that work in this space. And as I mentioned earlier, I'm a huge fan of training. And so I'm excited to see what you continue to do. So if our listeners really want to get in touch with you and learn more about you, what are the best ways for them to do that?
Sure. The most common, of course, are reach out with an email. Let's set something up. If you want to have a chat about what I do and if there's a way I can help you. And if I can't, I may know somebody who can, if it's not in my wheelhouse. And LinkedIn, connect with me on LinkedIn by all means. I have a business LinkedIn page, which I really don't even use, and my personal. I mean, I am my business. So I've been using my personal Rob Langejans business LinkedIn, personal LinkedIn page.
Sure.
So by all means, those are two ways to get in touch, and let's start a conversation, and who knows where it goes.
Absolutely. So guys, we will drop in the show notes Rob's email address, as well as the link to his LinkedIn profile. You know the rules around LinkedIn. If you do reach out, please be sure when you hit that connect button to add note, let Rob know that you heard him here on the Trend Report, and that's why you're connecting. And additionally, we will put the link to Rob's website there in the show notes. Sounds like he's got a lot of tools on his website. You can go check out some of the things that he's doing. And Rob, thank you for being such an active contributor to our amazing industry. And I know you're not going to NeoCon this year, but hopefully one day soon we'll actually get to meet face to face.
Same here. Well, thank you for the invitation, Sid. I appreciate it. And yes, hopefully we'll be in the same room at the same time doing some really good work together and in our industry and keep it going. So thanks again for the conversation. I appreciate it.
Well, it's been my pleasure. Thanks so much.
All right. Take care.